Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. This is Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz and Rob Oller, looking back on Ohio State's 31-7 win over Northwestern at Wrigley Field. It was, I think, a pretty fun environment for the most part, and in a lot of ways, we talked about previewing this game, and as Bill, you mentioned, that the setting was really the draw of the matchup, and I think by the end of the game that mostly held true. Although I think Carnell Tate catching 2 touchdowns in his return to Chicago was a cool story. But as far as the drama and the tussle of who's going to win the game, clearly I think it was outweighed by the friendly confines.
Well, not for the first quarter and a half, it wasn't. I mean, we expected Northwestern to just kind of roll over. Maybe not on purpose roll over, but just be overwhelmed. And that did not happen. The Northwestern, the first 2 drives went way down the field. The first ended in a fumble caused by Jack Sawyer, recovered by Davison and Gnosen. The second was a touchdown. And all of a sudden, it's 7-0 Northwestern with 7 minutes to go in the second quarter. You're thinking, what's going on here? And then Ohio State turned into Ohio State, and 21 points later, it was a pretty comfortable halftime lead, and they rolled in the second half. There still are some things that are concerning. I mean, let's face it. The fact that Northwestern was able, especially in the passing game, was able to expose Ohio State's pass defense is concerning. If Ohio State doesn't get a pass rush, they aren't great in coverage. And this is a Northwestern team that's not very good passing the ball. They got some chunk yardage on the ground, too. They shut it down in the last 2.5 quarters, but it was not a dominating performance from start to finish.
No, they're going to – Joey wrote this, I think, in his observations, but what are they going to do with Denzel Burke? I mean, he is at this point, I think it's fair to say, somewhat of a liability. And Northwestern picked on him. Oregon destroyed him. He bounced back a little bit against Nebraska, but he's the weak link. He's probably the weak link on that defense. He's definitely the weak link in the secondary. Is he a good player? Yes, and that's how I would say. I mean, it's an odd thing where all of a sudden Denzel Burke is like, your weak point on a defense. So that's one thing. I don't know if Bill, you're talking about sort of some concerns. I think that would be concern number one in some ways, at least defensively. Offensively, I thought they looked pretty good. I mean, I personally thought it was Will Howard's best passing performance because he was good. He was good on every throw. For the most part, he had a couple ones late that were because they were called off because of penalties. They weren't great throws, but by then the outcome was decided. So it'll be really interesting what Indiana does with Denzel Burke.
Yeah, I think there is something to teams targeting him more since the Oregon game. I was looking at his breakdown on Pro Football Focus, but in the first 5 games, teams targeted Denzel Burke 10 times, or no, they seem like they've been targeting him more lately. Like in the last, I'm doing math in my head right now, which I'm sure is scintillating for you all. But 11 times in the last 4 games, and in the first stretch of the season, it was. Never mind. I'm gonna stop this.
Scintillating is the right word. The eye test tells us. We know.
Journalists trying to do math, don't even try.
Journalists doing math live is
live.
Probably another.
But look, we don't need stats to say that. Right. We can see it with our own eyes. He doesn't have elite speed. That's just a fact. But he's always been very confident. That's probably been his best attribute. Very tough. Look, he's a good tackler. Run support. He's really good. I mean, it's not a bash Denzel Burke. He's suddenly trashed.
Well, it is what it is.
In terms of coverage, I mean, the cornerback's main job is to cover. And if I'm an offensive coordinator and I'm looking at that defense, I'm not. I mean, Davis Gnosen has some issues too with the handsiness and the pass interference stuff. So Ohio State's cornerbacks, and we'll talk about this later in the week in our podcast about Indiana, but they're going to be put to the test this week. And I think Caleb Downs is just a terrific player. I almost feel bad for him that he hasn't gotten more opportunities to show kind of like highlight reel film plays, but you just watch him on routine plays where he'll be 10 yards. I think Joey's pointed this out. He'll be 10, 12 yards off the play and tackle the guy like 10 yards closer. It's just, he closes so fast on the ball. He just never seems to make a mistake. Lathan Ransom is very solid. But the cornerbacks they got to figure that out.
With Denzel Burke, the issues are different. At least the issues he had against Northwestern were different than Oregon. Oregon, they had fast receivers who got behind him on the perimeter. The Northwestern game, he was with the guys, but in the catch, just the Northwestern receiver would be able to kind of out-muscle him to get it, felt like. Or maybe at that point, he's at a disadvantage with his size, but different sort of set of issue. And at least with Igbinosun, you maybe take the trade of it. Yes, there's a pass interference stuff, but you have the play at Penn State where there's some good to that style of play as well.
Bigger picture on Northwestern, Bill said it, they kind of struggled early. To me, it was a typical sleepy start for Ohio State. I thought the environment, as cool as it was and quote historic as it was a little underwhelming. I talked to some fans and they were just like, man, that was they described it as a sleepy game. And I don't know if it was a configuration of watching a football game in a baseball stadium. Once you got past the, hey, this is cool, the hey, this is cool factor, it did not present itself well in terms of how loud or how into it the crowd was. And of course, we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole about Ohio State fans and crowds, but let's put it this way: it was not an unbelievably loud or excited crowd. And I think sometimes the players pick up on that. I don't know. It was a weird vibe.
Part of it was 11 a.m. start local time, so it's early. Secondly, the sightlines. Look, they're baseball sightlines, so you weren't close to the one side of the field is relatively close, like the first base side. But then on the other side, it's essentially left and center field before you get to the bleachers. So there was the crowd was really far away if you were on the other side of the stadium, and even like behind home plate, was the end zone essentially, and so they're baseball sidelines for obvious reasons, and so it wasn't going to be allowed because of that. And again, Ohio State for the first quarter and a half didn't give anybody a reason to cheer. And there weren't many Northwestern fans there. So, you almost feel bad for Northwestern players, right? It's a home game technically, and it felt like it could have been in Ohio Stadium.
It would have been interesting if Northwestern actually tried to play that game on campus, which they were doing in that temporary practice facility thing on campus. It probably would have been more of a home field advantage in that situation because you wouldn't have all the traveling Ohio State fans. But that's neither here nor there. They played the game in Wrigley. It did seem fun. I know the game itself or the environment of Wrigley was not like a true college football venue, but when you got off the L on the way to the stadium, fans were taking in Wrigleyville. So that part, I think, was the tailgating part of it, if you will, or the bar hopping part of it, I think is nice. Because if you were gonna be a fan tailgating any game, you got to lug all your stuff and bring that. This one, you could just jump into one of the neighboring bars at 9 a.m. and go from there. But that seemed kind of cool.
Point. That's a great point. This might have been a game where people went even if you didn't have a ticket.
Yeah.
Like you go to the bars, you're there for the scene. You don't get you're not paying the 90, the minimum $90 up to, I think it was like over 1,000. I'm sure maybe some tickets went for. You're just showing up, having a good time, watching the game in the bar. And that was a good scene. But it's a weird team. They look sometimes they have individual superstars like Jeremiah Smith, that guy. He made some plays. He did make the drop, or at least let's put it this way, he didn't catch the ball in the end zone, which might have been Will Howard's best pass of the year and deep ball. But he's special. Ibuka's so smooth. G. Scott it was a really good throw and a really nice
that might have been
that was G's best play of the year.
Yeah, that was a nice catch too. He had to
was
to that. So they've got some Trevion ran hard, Judkins. you've got some individual. They just kind of have to put it together. I guess the fact we haven't talked about the offensive line now is a win for Ohio State because that's all we talked about for a while on this podcast. Was it great? I don't know. I defer to you guys on how the line played.
Well, they ran for what 150, 100, what was it, 150 yards, something like that.
170. They averaged over 5 yards per carry against Northwestern, which has I think a reasonably good.
Yeah, they do have a good run defense.
Their average yards per carry, Ohio State's beat was the highest since the season opener against Michigan State. So they were able to run the ball. Sometimes I think that was just a credit to Quinshon and Travion because they got hit a couple times in the backfield. Still were able to keep going forward, but I think overall the offensive line, you don't feel as if that is holding them back. I guess maybe it's not as. I think you still lose something with Simmons because I think he was playing so well, and you could really, I think, just move people with him on the left side. But I think we've sort of established that there is a sort of a baseline competency from that group, even without Josh Simmons, the starting left tackle.
Yeah, the throw that to me, the two throws you mentioned, the almost touchdown to Jeremiah Smith and the G. Scott throw, they were great throws. The one I thought might have been even better was the one he threw over the middle to Jeremiah Smith that he took for 68 yards because he threw that. When he threw it, I thought it was going to get picked, and he just threaded that right in there. It was a perfect throw. That was like a Joe Burrow kind of throw, and so he made at least three of those. I think he was 15 for 24 for 247, I think. I thought without question he was his best passing game. He wasn't close to being intercepted, didn't fumble. It just was in command. And some of the throws were elite throws. So, and the fact that he was able to show that he could throw the deep ball effectively was good. That was a perfect pass, like you said, Rob, to Jeremiah Smith. He just couldn't quite grab it before he hit the turf. But the throw was right on the money. And if they get that kind of play from Will Howard, they are certainly capable of going as far as they want to go.
Yeah, in terms of the windows that he was throwing to, it felt like one of his best games. Pro Football Focus, I noted this in our weekly stock report. They have a stat called Big Time Throws where they measure just the number of throws you make in a game that they at least grade to be fit in tight windows and are deep down the field. He had 5 of those, which was more than he's had at any point in his career. So it certainly felt like he was. I think his level of play backed that up because there were multiple that we all talked about. We thought this was his best throw all year. We thought no, this one was his best throw all year. There were multiple. I think where he was fitting it in tight windows. Either the one, Bill, you mentioned on the Jeremiah over the middle, or the one where he teardropped the G, or the one where he had Jeremiah that ultimately was dropped. Even the one to Carnell, I thought was a good for Carnell's Carnell State's first touchdown. He hit that in stride, and that was a nice throw as well. So overall, I agree it was his best in terms of just the way the precision on his passes was as good as he's been.
Yeah, I asked Ryan Day after the game, and if it was a footwork issue. He kind of said it was. He didn't get into a lot of detail, but I know they've been working on Howard's footwork. I'm no expert, so I don't know exactly what that entails, but it appears to be working.
We talked about it last Tuesday. He said he gets dead foot is kind of the term. Basically, when you get lazy with your footwork, and he's a big guy, 6'4", 235 pounds. And you have to kind of make a conscious effort at that size to make sure your footwork is crisp. And sometimes he doesn't. And so that was a point of emphasis last week. Based on the way he threw, it worked.
I think it's notable, too, that he's taken strides as a passer this point in the season. I think the thing you knew you were getting with Will Howard was the leadership. He's a good decision maker. He's played a lot of college football. He's also has the ability to run in short yardage, the quarterback sneaks, the ability in the red zone. But I think you wondered maybe what the ceiling was. Like, how much could he get better as just a pure downfield passer? I think the windows will get tighter against better defenses than Northwestern. But I think this suggests maybe that there is a higher ceiling or another gear he could find, and that's going to matter in some of these playoff games going forward, I think.
Yeah, I wrote in the analysis that basically this was the last of the let's get this over with games.
Yeah,
this is, and now it's real. Indiana, obviously, number 5 team in the country. Who would have ever thought that? Michigan, I know obviously Michigan's having a terrible year, but it's still Michigan. And the pressure on Ohio State in that game to win and win solidly is going to be immense. And then, of course, the postseason, whatever that is. And so Northwestern's kind of felt like, okay, let's get through this one, and then we can focus on what matters. So I think it was, in general, a good step forward, but they still have issues. And they play as a team. It's not like they're a collection of individuals. I mean, I know that's not what you were implying earlier, Rob, but they're not consistently dominant as much as you would think they would be. They have spurts. They're like a basketball team that kind of trades baskets and then all of a sudden goes on a 15-0 run, and that's game over. That's kind of what they are. You'd like to see them just, slam dunk after slam dunk after slam dunk and just run a team out of the gym.
Yeah, they're different than, I think, when we think about the recent teams. 2019 felt dominant because they just put their foot on the gas, I think, from the first quarter. This team is not like that, where in the first quarter they're lights out. I think they're really good in the third quarter. I mean, that's sort of the third quarter, I think, where they made their money this year. Some of the adjustments they made in that period, and the second and third quarters where they've I think been able to tighten things. But I mean, overall, right now, Bill, we were talking about this earlier, some of the defense and maybe not being dominant. They're still top 3 in all the major defensive.
Right. And maybe as we talked about it, maybe it's that they don't have that guy on defense, and I would argue Caleb Downs might be the exception, that you just kind of watch and go, oh man, he's going to take over the game. I mean, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer are very, very good players, very solid. Tyleik Williams, very solid. Cody Simon's developed into a very, he's again very solid. But they don't have that Chase Young, Bosa, game wrecker guy.
They have 4 sacks or anything like.
Yeah, that's just gonna. I mean, JT did it against Penn State, as we all know, but that's not really who he is. He's really good, very good against the run, as is Jack Sawyer. Defensive ends don't get a lot of credit. They should get more credit for how they are against the run, and those guys are good against the run. But they just don't have a guy that you just go, just watch him on this play. Right? I mean, they used to do that with Chase Young. I'm just going to watch Chase Young on this play. I don't know that they have that guy on defense.
I agree. It's Caleb Downs. If there is, Caleb Downs on this play, but he's safety. He's run support. He made a great, perfect tackle in that game. It was like you couldn't draw it up better. Put his head right into the guy's gut. It was like the was it run or pass? I can't even remember what it was now. But Caleb Downs came up and just he was like a brick wall, just dropped the guy. That was impressive. That was something. So I think he's the best guy on the field. He might be the best guy on either side of the ball for Ohio State, which is saying something when you got Jeremiah Smith. I think that's a toss-up play.
Just to go backwards 1 second, go back 1 second. You mentioned the scoring by quarters. Here's Ohio State scoring by quarters. First quarter, 73-26. Yeah, that's good. Second quarter, 129-43. Third quarter, 121-9. They get up 9 points. In other words, 3 field goals in the third quarter all year. They would give up a touchdown in the third quarter all season. And then the fourth quarter, a lot of it's garbage time with backups, 55-25. So they've made their hay in the middle quarters.
And I'd say in Oregon. In that
what?
Yeah. Or Oregon goes in that fourth quarter as a negative, but Penn State.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, here's the deal. I mean, we're talking about Northwestern, but just to look real for 10 seconds ahead, you do not want to have a sleepy start against Michigan.
No. Oh my God. Then all the doubts creep in.
You do not.
Oh my God, no.
And it's not to say they can't win if they do that.
But you don't want murmuring in the stadium.
Right.
You don't want that. Oh my God, here's happening again.
Yes.
And you don't want that.
And not just fans, but what's it say? Right. What's it do for Michigan, right?
And for Ohio State.
And Joey, we were just talking today, 1993. I don't want to steal Joey's thunder, but 1993 was 28 zip.
Yeah.
And Michigan was unranked and 6-4 going in and beat the Buckeyes 28.
Yakabatuka.
That was
that wasn't Biakabatuka.
No, that was 93, and that was
right.
Again, Michigan unranked, and Ohio State was 9-0-1.
Yeah,
9-0-1. Michigan was 6-4. It was up there. It was in Ann Arbor, and I mean, Joey can talk more about it. We don't need to talk about that now. We can talk about that, after.
I think really both of these next two games, they will want to avoid the slow start thing. And it's been, you see, it wasn't just Northwestern that had a sleepy start. I mean, in some ways, Penn State they were down 10-0. Sure, they came back and all that, but I think both these weeks will be important because you look at this Indiana game. Ohio State's played in 2 top 5 games this year. Indiana's never played a top 5 game in its history. And I think if you can get on them early, it's going to be an unfamiliar position for them. And I think that then you energize the crowd and you can kind of pick up steam from there. Then Michigan's the opposite problem, where if you don't get ahead early, let's the anxiety in the building just drip down to the field. It's going to be just oozing with anxiety. So I think for different reasons, I think the bloodlust maybe for Indiana than the anxiety for Michigan are the incentives for both of these next two games. Northwestern, it was a sleepy start, but it didn't really. I don't think any point in the first quarter were you dreading or fearing that Ohio State was going to lose the game.
There were some anxious things. Let me just tell you, there were some people in the at Wrigley who were like, "Oh no, here we go."
I will say I did stop my baseball puns for a brief period of time when Northwestern.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
I said a brief period of time, and then we went back.
They were almost thrown out at home.
Well, then I started throwing strikes again.
Oh, here we go. Anyhow, enough with the Wildcats.
For Captain Hook.
The funny thing is that they've played these teams, I guess maybe other than Purdue, who really aren't that good, but for like a quarter looked pretty good. Nebraska looked pretty good, and then Nebraska falls apart after that. Northwestern looked pretty decent. I don't know if it's the scripted play, the scripted offense on the first series, or what it is, but Ohio State's defense, again, kind of takes some time to get up to snuff.
It does feel like most teams they play, they're always going to have a good opening script where you're going to a battle and you're the underdog. You're going to fire all your artillery as much as you can.
The other thing is like the first series, wasn't it 3rd and 15 and they ran it and got the first down, right? That was the third play of the game, I think. And
these teams shoot themselves. I mean, the fumble was a big play. I mean, they're driving, they go down there, they fumble. Nebraska had a similar situation. Michigan State had similar situation. Right. I'm not sure any of those teams are really going to win those games. And again, I wrote this after the game to just a quick give credit where due. Ryan Day is 47-0 against unranked teams. And a lot of people are like, poo-poo that. Like, oh, yeah, but he can't win the big one. Well, he has won some big ones, but he hasn't ever lost the truly little one. So there's something to be said for that. That's all.
There is. The other team's trying too.
No Vanderbilt loss.
Right. I mean, there's no
no Northern Illinois loss.
They just don't do that.
Notre Dame.
They just don't do that. Look, we have to go back to 2018. Was that the Purdue game? That was the Purdue game. When that was kind of strange circumstance, people remember what was going on then. I don't think anyone who was there at the time really thought that was, the route that it was a blowout, yes. But that Purdue beat Ohio State that particular week, there was a lot going on that week. So, but yeah, Ryan Days avoided that.
Right. And here's the deal. There really haven't been any close calls. The closest call might have been Nebraska having the ball with the ability to, at the last series. You get past that, and I think there was a 12-point win in there, something like that I had. But if you really look through the history, those 47 wins, none of them were like, uh-oh, at the end.
Really, that Nebraska game is one of the few exceptions where they had a chance in the final minutes of the fourth quarter to mount a game-winning drive.
Absolutely.
Very, very few. I'd be interested to know even just how many one-score games out of that 40.
I'm looking at it right now. Maryland last year, 43-30. That was a close game. Remember Maryland?
That was the one I was thinking of. Other than that, man, there's not much.
2022, not last year.
It's not a one-score game though. You said 43-30.
No, right. That was not a one-score game.
I think Nebraska's it for one-score game. I did a quick look during the game. We don't need to sit here and talk up Ryan Day,
It is. I think it is meaningful, though. I mean, it's certainly, I think, given them the big reason why they're in the playoff conversation every year, and they're probably a big reason why they're going to remain in the playoff conversation because you just don't have the inexplicable loss. Yeah. I think ultimately you're going to need to be able to win big games because what's different about the playoff format is you're going to have to win 3 of them, and before you just had to win 2 of them, and maybe if you don't get a bye, you might have to win 4. So that part of the conversation is different, but at least getting to the dance, certainly there's enough that he's proven over the years to put them really, I think, perennially in the playoff.
We've talked about this before. These Urban Meyer and Ryan Day, in a lot of ways, in certain ways at least, are the glory days of Ohio State football. 10 wins every single year. 9-3, Earl Bruce, 9-3 Earl. There's none of that. They've never lost more than 2 games since 2012. That's just astounding. I looked this up last year when I was doing some story on it, and the only other team that can say that in the history of college football is Saban's Alabama team. That's it. I mean, so yes, they haven't won. They won 1 national championship in 2014. They've been a lot of disappointments. We all know that litany of heartbreak. But there's something to be said for being in the hunt every single year and being there every year. And they are. And they're again this year.
Well, even think back, the last time they lost to Northwestern was in 2004. Right. That was an 8-4 year under Jim Tressel. They haven't even had sort of that wasn't really, I don't know if you call it a rebuilding year, but it was certainly a reset year. Yeah. Say where you go 8-4 after you lose a bunch of upperclassmen and you reload for 05. In 2006, they haven't quite had that either. And their reload year was really 21. They won a Rose Bowl.
Right. And then let's close on this maybe. Going into Penn State game, 2-6 Ryan Day against top 5 teams. That's a bad mark. It's a bad record. Beats Penn State 3-6. Now it has a chance to be 4-6. Which, okay, that's still not 500. It's still not winning. But 4-6 looks a heck of a lot better than 2-6. Yeah. And you've gone back-to-back wins against top 5 teams. So with a chance, if this thing plays out the way we think it probably will, with a chance to get some revenge against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game and win another. Now you could lose it, but win another against a big top 5 team, suddenly you're 5-6. And that's right. You can't ask for anything more than 500 against a top 5 team. You're going to lose some of those games. They're really good team.
Right. And then let's also point out that Ohio State, unlike Indiana and Penn State and Oregon, has played all those other teams. Oregon's played only Ohio State. Penn State has played only Ohio State. Indiana has played only Ohio State. Right? They haven't played each other. So Ohio State's the only team that has played all 3 of those teams. And so, to get through that gauntlet, I mean, who would have thought Indiana would be part of a gauntlet? But they are. I mean, look, I've watched Indiana. They're legitimately good. We'll see just if they're on Ohio State's level, but that's why they play. But Penn State's had the cushiest schedule of all. They've had 1 real game and they lost it at home. Oregon's had 1 hard game, really, and won it at home. Indiana is going to have their first one. So I think I think that will help Ohio State in the playoff, in the postseason, having played that competition. I think it will help them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to serve them well. Just they're going to be battle tested. But yeah, we will obviously with another top 5 matchup unfolding this week with Indiana coming to Columbus. We'll have more to preview that game in the weeks, or not in the weeks ahead, in the days ahead. I think Bill's going to talk to Zach Osman from the Indy Star for a podcast, and then the 3 of us will get back together later in the week to give some predictions, to talk more in depth about the matchup. That was recapping Ohio State's 31-7 win over Northwestern. Should be a fun stretch run, as Bill said. The soft part of the schedule is truly over. Every game right now going forward has significant stakes. Indiana, Michigan, and then whatever the postseason holds. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast. Be back in your feeds later this week.
Be sure and subscribe to the BuckeyeXtra Podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.